Check, check. Oh, I'm going to take this off. All right. Okay. No.
Hello?
Oh, no, you're on. You're good. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming here on a Friday afternoon. That's the happy hour time in the university campus. So the best things happen then. So I appreciate you all being here. And I very much appreciate Michael Price, showrunner of F is for Family, executive producer of The Simpsons, and proud graduate of Montclair State University. Thank you so much. I know your time is precious. You don't get over to the East Coast that often, and I appreciate you taking some time to be here with us.
Such a pleasure to be here. I always love coming back.
Absolutely. Now, before we get started, today's a very important day. Beyond it being Friday, which is, the second day of your weekend, it also is someone's birthday. So before we go any further, I would be remiss if we didn't at least get a rendition of Happy Birthday. So, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Michael. Happy birthday to you. All right.
Thank you so much.
And as you can see, there was someone named Michael who's having a 29th birthday, so that was the best we could do. No, we don't have a candle budget. We don't have a candle.
That's a prop cake.
Yeah,
so.
And if anyone eats, by the way, it's all wax, so do not touch that. And it's at least 3 weeks old. So
Thank you so much.
Before we get started, though, we are going to watch something that I believe no one that's been outside of.
You'll be the first people outside of anyone at my group or Netflix to see this. This is a 2-minute clip from the first episode of the new season of F is for Family. So please don't film it or anything like that, because if this gets back to Netflix, they might not put the show out. So please don't stream it or film it or post it or anything like that, please, because no one else has seen this. The new season comes out on Thanksgiving Day this year. We just announced it the other day. And all you need to know about this is the family is getting ready to go to a funeral at a funeral home. So this is there's a brand new baby too in the Murphys have. So you'll see the new baby, and you'll see them getting ready to go to a funeral. That's all you need to see. Okay.
All right, we're all set. Good. All right.
Some minor swear words. That's it. My apologies for the profanity and raunchiness.
Never heard that before. Certainly not in a classroom. So, So let's start with Family Guy. It's now we're 6 years into this.
Family Guy?
I mean, oh my God. Thank you for coming, everyone. F is for family. So, who said Family Guy during lunch? Who are you? So, let's talk with F is for family. It's now 6 years old, right? We're entering into our 5th season. All right. Could you just give us some of the high points, and also could you talk about some of the challenges of kind of coming back year after year, particularly at a time when it's harder and harder to kind of keep eyeballs in a world where, as we talked about earlier, there's endless content?
Well, that's a really good question. It's been such a joy for me. I mean, the highlights of it have been everything, because I spent many years working on other things, working on other shows, specifically The Simpsons, which I'm so grateful to still have a home there. And they let me, which they didn't have to do, but whenever I had a chance to work on a new season of F is for Family, they would just let me sort of go away and take like a sabbatical or whatever, for a couple of months and then come back. So I'm eternally grateful to them for that, but also just to have the chance to work on like one of the greatest shows of all time. But to have a thing that came from me and came from my experience, and the process of developing it and creating it with Bill Burr was so special and unique, and there's so much of my life in it, and my family life, and what it was like growing up in my house and down in South Plainfield in New Jersey. All right. And so many of the neighbors in the neighborhood of this show are based on my neighbors, and there's characters named after my high school teachers, and so it's been really, really fun to revisit that time, and to have a place like Netflix where we could do that and do a show like that where people are talking that way, and and worse, and real kind of raw version of life, in an animated format, and for them to give us their full and complete support at all times, and we never got censored from them, hardly ever. They never told us don't do this or that. They just let us do what we did. Has been great, and it was the way a show like that gets put together is strange, because we would work super hard on it, and then like we'd have to wait several months to sort of find if we came back again. So I would like work intensely hard on it for about a year, and then there'd be like maybe 6 or 7 months where nothing was happening and we started up again. So each time we had to start up again, and it was harder on the writing staff, who that's a kind of a new reality out in the TV business now, where sometimes you could work on a show and you'll work really hard for like 5 or 6 months and then maybe have a year off, or depending on what's going on. So that was hard for them, but it was always happy to bring them back, and it's been an amazing journey with everyone. Very sadly, and this last season, which also is the final season. That's the other thing, is that we found out last summer when they said, "We love season 4 came out last summer, and it's great. We love it. You guys are doing good. Guess what? We're picking you up for another season, and it's going to be the last one." So we were like, "Oh, that's great," but also not so great. And that whole last season was produced via remote, like all of us. We were never in a writer's room together. We were always on Zoom. The animators were all working remotely from home. All the recordings were done remotely. Sometimes the actors would be able to get into a recording studio, but one at a time, completely, they have to clean the recording studio for COVID for half an hour in between actors. But for the most part, a lot of the actors were just recording from their own homes. Some of the more professional voice actors already have professional like microphone setups, or if they do podcasts, they could do it that way. But some, like Laura Dern, one of the biggest movie stars, in the world, was recording from her closet in her house. So we were on Zoom, and she was just sitting there, literally, I could see her sitting there like on a little stool with like her clothes all around her, like, and then we would mail them a microphone to do it. So to get through that and to still make an amazing show under those circumstances was incredible. And very sadly, we lost 2 of our members to COVID. Two of my most important writers, 2 of my really closest friends, David Richardson and Mark Wilmore, passed away, both within a couple weeks ago. They're in January. from COVID. That was incredibly hard, and we also lost one of our actors a couple weeks ago. A wonderful man named Michael Kenneth Williams, who was, you may remember him from being on The Wire, Omar on The Wire, and I got to know him just a tiny little bit from being on our show, but we lost him then too. So anyway, it's been just an amazing experience, and people say like 5 seasons on Netflix, that's amazing. But I think that is kind of the new paradigm now. They'll like Netflix shows will maybe run 3 seasons, so we got 5. And I always joke, I say, well, I'm kind of used to being on shows that run for 33 and 34 seasons. So anyway.
So, you mentioned how you were able to do this show virtually through COVID. And I remember we talked when everything kind of first happened, because we were on our way to come see you.
Right, you were on literally a week from coming out.
We were Guy and I were trying to get upgrades, and then next thing you know, we're not going. And so but in obviously Hollywood shut down, production shut down, but you guys were kind of the first ones to realize, hey, we can still do this, and you became, not to be glib, but you were like the frontline workers of entertainment. So look, it's obviously all these remote kind of processes kind of came to be, and you don't need to walk us through all of that, but what I'm most interested in, I think a lot of the students will be interested in, is do you think the way that you started to do things, remote writers' rooms and voiceovers in closets, is that the future, or are you coming back to how it was? What's going to stay from COVID?
That's really interesting, and I don't know, because the remote writers' room was very difficult at first, because it started originally on the Simpsons. Like I was on the Simpsons, literally. I remember like when suddenly like there was that day when like that's it, it was like that day in March of last year when like the NBA shut down. It was like that one day when
like
it
the
was
11th. Or
that's
like
it.
That.
Goodbye. And so suddenly we were all learning how to do it. It was very difficult at first because there's usually the writers' room is like 7 or 8 of us at a time, and like how do you? Everyone knows what happened on Zoom, but we learned how to make it work, and it works fine. There were certain benefits of it, which was that we were all just home, and so like I normally have like a 30 or 40 minute commute to get to the studio. Now I'm just sort of just walking into the spare bedroom, But at the same time, there's that essence of, especially in the comedy writers' room, of all being together in the same room that was missed, I think. So they tell us we may go back to our Simpsons writers' room sometime in the beginning of next year. I hope so, or maybe there'll be a way. Maybe we could do virtual, like maybe, who knows, maybe we'll like 3 days we'll be there, 2 days we'll be out. Because some of the people are able to like go off, and one of the writers, he has a second home in Hawaii. So he's been in Hawaii the whole time, so good for him. So as far as like remote production is concerned, I think that could happen because prior to the pandemic, if I had to do an editing session, like I'd have to go and sit with the editor, the picture editor, to work on an episode. I would have to drive across town, like from where my office was at Fox Studios, where Simpsons is, where the Epstein Family offices were, like a good 35 or 40 minute drive to get there, and then sit in the room. And now, thanks to the newer technology, I could just dial it up, and I could edit from wherever, So hopefully that's the kind of thing that I think might possibly still happen. So I think it'll be a combination of both.
F is for Family is a period piece, right? It comes from a time period, and that kind of puts you in that way of thinking, the technologies. I mean, there's some things that are obvious, right? When you see how the house is and the kind of things that are new and innovative, them the way they talk. But yet, we've gone through this incredibly turbulent time and this, in a whole bunch of different ways. So the last few years have been just challenging, right? And a lot of issues that weren't being talked about. I mean, look, the pandemic is obviously at the forefront, but really everything, and a lot of social unrest and so forth. How do you, as a showrunner, and this is your baby, and it's a comedy show, and you want people to laugh. Are you cognizant of trying to figure out how to incorporate kind of today's, I don't want to say messages, but almost ethos into a show that's from, decades and decades ago?
Well, in a way, yes. In a way, no. I mean, in a way, it helps to sort of stay focused on just the characters and the stories we're trying to tell. We never set out, even at the beginning, to sort of make a grander statement. I mean, in a way, we were kind of like looking back at a time that, from my youth, and it's funny because I remember when we first started coming up with the show, this was like 2013 or so, when we first pitched it. 2014, Barack Obama was the president, and there was a general feeling, at least from my point of view, that we're moving forward, we're becoming a progressive country now, and so looking back in a funny kind of funhouse mirror, at the first season, especially the first episode, especially has all these shout outs or punch downs to like sexism and racism. There's the guy who's like the TV news host, this guy named Jim Jeffords, who's kind of our stand-in for all the idiot TV news anchors. But he's hosting like this show about feminism, and he's the male host telling the women they look hot, and things like that. And then later on, he's hosting like black issues, and he's the white guy hosting black issues, and so we were like laughing at, isn't that funny how stupid and how racist and how sexist we used to be back in the 70s, how awful everything was, and then amazingly to me, like time went on, and the world caught up and went in a completely different direction than I certainly didn't expect. And now it's sort of, I don't know, it's kind of like we're looking at what's going on right now. Like last year, we had our season that came out last summer, came out June 20th or so, I think, of last year, had a big section on it that had to do with our one of our main characters named Rosie, who's the African American guy who works at the airport and wants to become he runs for office and becomes an alderman in his town. And we did a big episode all about like the systemic racism trying to keep him out, and the mayor was a corrupt mayor who's trying to knock him down, and it all came out right when the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd stuff was happening. So it felt strange to be there, like as if we're acting like this is from long ago, but it's still happening now. And there's a scene in this upcoming season that more directly calls that out, where Rosie gets pulled over by the police, and he has a little bit of gets oppressed by them, has a hard time.
Is it hard to be a comedy writer when you're like when truth is becoming always stranger than fiction? Like, are you like you can't reach anymore? Like, it's hard to get. It's hard
I guess
to get
all we can do is just stay with our show, at least, is stay true to the characters and stay true to the stories we're trying to tell, and just not try to think that way. Just sort of just do what we think is right, what works for the characters and what works for our particular show, and still makes us laugh.
I wanted to ask kind of a similar question about The Simpsons, and we talked a little bit earlier about kind of the importance of story and the centrality of it. And, there's the jokes, but there's the story. And as you're kind of, putting together a Simpsons episode and pitching the ideas, is there a moment where you have to kind of take a step back and think, well, I mean, The Simpsons has been, for the entirety of its run, and particularly early in its, in its genesis, when it was, there weren't 700 channels, and The Simpsons was the cultural artifact that everyone kind of marked their lives by at some point. And if you happen to have been a school teacher, I believe I told you, relatively early in its run, and I just despised the show because every student wanted to be Homer Simpson in class. If you're teaching junior high school, Simpsons is not your friend. And so is there a moment when you're putting the show together to kind of say, all right, what is this show going to be about? Because it's going to be a cultural marker. Like, there are episodes of The Simpsons that are locked into the zeitgeist, right? It's part of America. Do you ever think about like this episode's going to mean something and stand, or is it still like, no, we just need a story?
No, I think that, I think we're certainly aware of how, I've been on The Simpsons now, it'll be 20 years this December since I joined them. And even then it was like a cultural icon, and, it continues to be, especially in the time of social media now, where, memes and like we've actually done a couple of jokes about the Homer backing into the hedges meme, which is become a huge thing, and we had him do it, and then Bart did it, and actually one of the younger writers pitched like Bart holding up his phone and showing Homer like the meme of him going into the hedges, and it was like, oh, like Homer was like, what the hell is that? So we're certainly aware of it, But I think when we're working on the show, we don't think that way. We really just focused on the task at hand, which is like coming up with new interesting stories to continue to keep the characters fresh and keep the show fresh and find something new. And if we try to think on a larger scale like that, we're going to be in trouble. So, and we have no idea what's going to take off or not. Like I was working on an episode like a number of years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was or what it was, but it became one of the things that now like you see all the time. And at the time no one thought it would be that. It's just a joke, and it's the joke where it's the picture of it's a newspaper photograph of Grandpa Simpson going like this thing, old man yells at cloud. And I remember the day I was in the room that day, and I think Al Jean, our showrunner, pitched it. And we're like, oh, that's funny, but like who knew that it would become this thing? No one knew.
So you're a comedy writer, which I don't admit this to Guy, but I think is one of the most difficult things in the world to be, right? It is very hard to be. I thought that was a good line. I mean, I had a little joke, and I'm not even going to do it. It's not funny now. It's scripted. It's like I'm going to other than say calculus. Like, it's not funny. It's not funny, right? But what advice do you have for aspiring comedy writers? And maybe kind of part B to that is, I'm of the ilk that it's kind of like being a cleanup hitter. Like you might be able to play baseball, but there's only one person that's going to be able to. How does someone know if like, all right, I'm not that funny, like, which is a hard thing to hear, but how do they know? And maybe I can do other things. So how do they develop their craft? But how do they get a realistic sense of? And it can't be just like, oh, my friends laugh at my jokes. Everyone does that.
Well, that's where it begins, though. I think like in my family growing up, I have three brothers, and they're all very funny, and so our family dynamic largely consisted of like making fun of each other and making jokes about each other and like doing like every day was like a roast, like we find something to pick on and whatever. So being fast-witted and thinking of something funny was always a high priority in our house. And I think it was like that sort of developing for me, at least, sort of like a view of the world of finding what is funny, like finding something that is funny and remembering it and keep taking note of it. Or like I mentioned, some of the characters in our show are based on people that I knew growing up in my neighborhood. So there's a character on our show called Goomer, who is this very strange guy who's the neighbor who like peeks in the window all the time. And among other things. And he's based on a guy who was my neighbor growing up in South Plainfield, not named Goomer, but he was a very odd man who would walk his dog, and like you'd see him always sort of like, he'd always be like peeking around and looking in the window. And even as kids, we didn't realize that that's not right. That's not right. So we remembered those kinds of things, and there's one thing in the show that actually was, when I first met with Bill Burr about working with him on the show, he told me later, he was like, when you told me that story, that's when I realized you're the guy for me, which is the thing that I noticed. My dad was a sweet, wonderful man. He passed away a few years ago, but he was a sweet man. He was nothing like this character, but he had his own anger issues, and he wouldn't express them by like having a giant tirade. But he'd get them out in other ways. Like he'd yell, like when he was putting the Christmas tree up, he'd be like cursing at the Christmas tree stand. Get in there, you son of a goddamn, like that kind of thing, that kind of thing. And I'm sure a lot of people know that, but have people like that. But there was one particular moment that really crystallized for me who he was, and like, because he had a really good sense of like what was right and wrong, and like morality and that, and he always hated being cheated. And anyway, and he really stood up for himself. Even though he wasn't like, in the grand scheme of things, he worked for a construction company in Edison where he serviced like the heavy paver machines, so he wasn't like a rich, famous guy, but he had his own sense of who he was and integrity. Anyway, we were watching the Mets, as we always did, and the Mets had these commercials back in the 70s for this cigars called White Owl cigars. And the commercial was a guy, like a real smug guy, sitting there with a cigar, and he'd go like, "You may not smoke White Owl cigars, but if you take one puff, you will." because we're gonna get you. That was their slogan. He's like, we're gonna get you. And he said it in that exact smug way. And my dad literally just out of nowhere, like yelled back at the TV saying, "You're not gonna get me, you son of a bitch!" You know. So my brothers and I, we looked at each other like we're like 11 years old or something, you know, and we're like, "Wow, there's a lot going on with Dad today," you know. So I told that story to Bill, and he really laughed really hard, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's it, you know." And then so we tried for 3 or 4 seasons to get that into the show. We eventually got it in the 4th season of the show. But it's that kind of thing of like developing like a take, like an attitude, a point of view towards the world that you find funny, and finding a way to. I mean, the real hard part, you know, as Guy will say too, is like have that, but also how do you construct it? How do you make it into something that's funny? And for me, that was also like trial and error, which I got involved in doing. After I went to college here, I went on to graduate school for theater, and then I got involved when I came back to this area in improv and sketch comedy in New York City, and that's where I really developed it because I was performing in front of other people, and we got to perform in shows, and you know, then that's where you'd write a thing on Thursday and put it up on Saturday night in front of a group of people, and if it got laughs, then that's how you figured out, oh, okay, I can do this.
Right. There's something about like kids, and particularly I think sons and like dads in television. The thing my dad used to always say to us is when we'd sit in front of him when he's watching television, it's like, "Is your father a glass maker?" And we'd be like, "No." He's like, "Then how the hell do you think I can see through you?" And we're like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense, Dad. Like, we're not invisible if you make glass." But there's something about that dynamic that brings it out. So let's talk a little bit about comedy, because as you know, comedy is under a little bit of a microscope these days, and has been for a few years, and a lot of that's driven by social media and the discourse that can happen, the second life that anything that someone says might have on a different platform that brings a lot of people to the table. Obviously, Dave Chappelle is, you know, currently, you know, kind of the center of public scorn at this particular moment. Now, I don't want to ask you about certainly any one particular writer or entertainer, and I don't even want to ask you really about kind of the notion of cancel culture, which is a term I do hope eventually fades into the rearview mirror as kind of a vernacular. But what I want to know is whether you think there should be more room and consideration for comedy to press the boundaries of discourse. So, and not meaning to sound insensitive, but are we getting to a point right now where we're almost afraid to laugh, where we are kind of confining ourselves in this place where we have kind of such fear that we aren't able to allow comedy to be a space where we can be, the term politically incorrect also doesn't work very well, but to be a little more open in how we explore kind of society, I suppose? And is the current state suppressing comedy writers from kind of really being their best?
I don't know. Personally, just from my personal point of view, I don't feel like it's happening to what I've been doing on Officer Family or on The Simpsons. I mean, there are certain things, as you may all know, like certain things have happened changing with the times in terms of what's going on with The Simpsons, in terms of representation, in terms of some of the voices, you know, Apu in particular, and some of the other characters being, I think that's a good thing. You know, I don't want, I mean, the last thing I would want, it would be something that I did there's one thing between like being offended by something or to be actually targeted by someone. You know, I haven't seen the Dave Chappelle thing, so I don't feel like I can comment on that. But yeah, it's not right for someone to come out and like target someone else, or to say like this person doesn't belong to live or whatever. That's not right, I don't think. But as far as like humor or comedy is concerned, I think there should be room that you can laugh at something, or you can be offended by something, but then you just don't watch it anymore. You know, and I mean, I say this as someone who's not like in a group that's been picked on. You know, I'm an old white guy. You know, so we've had a pretty good run. But so I wouldn't want to speak for someone who was offended or was personally offended by something. So I will never say you shouldn't feel that way. But I will say that, like, if you can, like, just don't watch it. You know, there's so much out there. There's so much to see or not see. I do think that comedy has a place, which is to point out foibles or make points about what's going on in the world. And I hate for that to not have to be anymore. I do think that it does help for my particular show that we were able to, because we set in the past, we're able to sort of say like this was then, and also it's a cartoon, which also helps it, because Bill Burr will say like that's a cartoon kid getting bullied, that's not a real kid. And similar with the Simpsons, like Homer hasn't strangled Bart in a while, but when he does, it's awful, but it's a cartoon, So I don't know. I'm sort of rambling, but I don't know. I have noticed in the past few years, like there's a much more of a, maybe because it is social media, like a strong engagement with things that when you and I were younger and we were watching a show on TV and we hated it, we just sit around and maybe we hang out with our friends saying that show sucked last night, But now you can go and tell the whole world how you feel about it, and I think that has changed a little bit. That there's a feeling of ownership and towards certain things, towards certain shows that people love, and I'm not sure that's great, but that's what it is.
It's interesting. Like it's brought the intense fandom, and it's just brought the polarization of like if you love something, you really love it, and you're all in, and if you hate something, you make sure everyone knows. I just want to we're gonna be taking questions from the audience, so be preparing and getting ready to ask some questions. And so that wasn't a laugh. That wasn't a laugh line. So let's talk a little bit about social. All right, there are just a gazillion ways to distribute content. We went through like 50 different streaming platforms during lunch, and beyond that, there's obviously all the social platforms that are drawing millions and millions of eyeballs. So how do you think students, and I'm not going to ask you like, oh, what's your are you on TikTok a lot? Like that's because I don't know that TikTok's for us. Like I don't know that that's our thing, right? But how do you think students should be thinking about developing content, and for what platform? So a lot of students here, I'm sure, yes, I'm sure a lot of students aspire to have a show on Netflix or a show on Hulu or a show on, even a broadcast network, right? That's still a big thing. But obviously a lot of them are already making content and have, wide YouTube TikTok followings and spend a lot of time Instagram, right? So how do you think students should be focusing their creative energy, and what part of their portfolio should be focused on kind of these new media platforms?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, it is a brave new world in a way. Like I don't subscribe to TikTok. I know what it is. I see it. We're trying to get a big TikTok person to be on our episode of The Simpsons. I won't say who it is because we haven't gotten that person to do it yet. But I mean, that's like, wow, that person has 60 million TikTok people. Like that's better than us. We're just The Simpsons. So I'm very active on Twitter, and I think Facebook has now turned into like the old.
Yeah, but I like it. I feel comfortable there. It's like
Facebook is like old guy stuff now. And old guy and people who want to destroy the country. That's the place. That's the two places for Facebook. So yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. Like, but like what happens is that there are people who like, who have amazing big Twitter feeds or big Instagram followings or big TikToks, who then because of that will then be approached to be in more mainstream things. So I think that's great. I mean, whatever helps you express who you are and gets you engagement, I think is great. And if it means that like if you made like an amazing, like for instance, and I don't follow it super strongly, but I know that one of the new cast members on Saturday Night Live is this guy who I think started out mostly doing his stuff on video or on TikTok. I think his name is Joshua Jackson, or he's one of the newest guys. Who does this amazing Trump impersonation. He's a comedian who's like does a lot of other stand-up and everything, but I think he's really well known from doing these things, and that certainly helped him get on Saturday Night Live. So I think that there's a way to use those kind of platforms to get you seen by the bigger world. I mean, years ago when I was starting out, like there was nothing like that. Like I performed in a live show that people came to see, and that's how I got my first break, was someone came to see me and a performer do a comedy show in New York, and they thought we were good and said, "Oh, we want to represent you." So that was great. If this was me, a young person now, I'd be doing that same stuff, but I'd be maybe performing live at a theater, but I'd be certainly making YouTubes or Instagram or TikToks, whatever, to try to get my stuff out there. So I think that's great.
So as we're talking about different forms of content, we talked a little bit about my viewing pleasures during lunch. As you know, Blue Bloods rose unfortunately high on the list. I did Magnum PI. It's a Friday night thing. I'm in a good mood at that point. I am an old person. Like CBS, like I think they send me like mailers at this point. They're like, "You're our guy," right? So, but I just finished Only Murders in the Building, which I thought was
very good. I love that show.
Fantastic, right? Who would have guessed that two senior guys are going to be like this smash hit, right? Everyone's we talk a little perplexed over the just insane success of Ted Lasso. Not that it's not, I mean, I watch it, great, but it just kind of exploded at a time when it didn't seem like that was the formula. And I know this is an unanswerable question, because if you had this answer, you would be running all of the studios in Hollywood. But what is the formula, or because you would have never I would have never thought of those two shows as like, these are going to be the ones. And here we are. Particularly in a world that's driven by algorithms and programmatic, like what is the thing? How does it work?
I think no one knows that. Like, if everyone knew that, then there would be whatever. Everybody would be there wouldn't be people getting fired as heads of networks like every other week. No one knows. The only thing that happens is that, like, now, and I'm already hearing it. Sorry, my phone is going off, but I'll let it ring through. Now everyone will be making the next Ted Lasso. Like, I can almost guarantee you that everyone in Hollywood right now is saying, like, what's the next Ted Lasso? We've got to do that. And then there'll be like 5 shows that are like that. And maybe some will do well, maybe some won't do well. But then another show will come out of the blue that's completely opposite of that. And that'll be like, well, look at, like, I mean, there's no more anti-Ted Lasso than Squid Game, right? Which is like, literally came out of nowhere. I imagine it was already a big hit in Korea, but like, it seemed to me, at least from my perspective, overnight. Like, it was like everyone was talking about it. I haven't had a chance to see it yet. Well, actually, I started to watch it, and I was like, the first 10 minutes were like, oh, I don't know, they're so sad, and I just was not in the right frame of mind for it, But I'm sure it's amazing.
Magnum PI. I'm telling you, that'll cheer you up,
Right. So, but anyway, so you never know. Like, now they'll all be chasing Squid Game. Like, maybe the guy who's making the next Ted Lasso. Oh, okay. Well, now it's going to be Squid Game. Whatever, because they're always chasing the thing, and the thing that's original, the thing that's new will come out of nowhere, and that'll be the thing that people want to see.
Yeah, so it goes from, like, just
right.
Endless happy American soccer coach to dystopian nightmare overnight.
Right, yeah.
So,
like, when the Simpsons came out so many years ago, but when that came out, there was a massive amount of Simpsons copycat shows. None of them ended up doing really well. But yeah.
So this is my last question. Then we're going to turn it over. What was very rough crowd. And we started earlier. Everyone's like introducing, like, oh, do you know Dr. Strudler? And everyone's like, no. I'm like, I'm nobody here. We got to get my pictures back up on the rotation. So, at any rate, my final question is, you're dropping a new season of F is for Family. What should we be looking for? Are there any? I know you can't give us, but any kind of, like, oh, you should watch for this is going to be great.
Well, I mean, the one thing I'll say, I mean, I made a joke earlier about Netflix saying you're picked up but you're canceled, which was very hard for me, because I've given so much of myself to the show, and I dearly love it, and I feel like we could have gone on for a while more, but it was really nice to know that we had a chance to end it on our terms. So it's only 8 episodes. That was the other like bitter pill, was that for various reasons, the season, as you saw in that clip, starts around Halloween and builds through Christmas. So our final episode is set on Christmas Day. So we knew it would be great to be able to come out around this time, and there is a big Thanksgiving episode in the middle of the season. So part of the reason they decided to make only 8 episodes was, by the time they decided to bring us back, they thought, like, well, you couldn't get 10 episodes ready in time for Thanksgiving. So anyway, but so we're able to wrap things up in a I think in a very happy and satisfying way for all the main characters, but specifically for the main character Frank, who's played by Bill, who has to deal with a significant loss and figure out what that means to his life and to himself as a husband, as a father, and there's a bit of a mystery where he's trying to figure out something about his own father, that he's trying to literally go on an actual mystery of trying to solve. His father says something that's kind of cryptic, and he has to figure out what that means. So he's on this quest to sort of figuring out what it means. So that's really fun. And as you saw, that little guy, we have our own version of Evel Knievel in the show this year, and Buster Thunder, and it's really, really fun, jam-packed, full of 8 episodes, full of really funny stuff, but also some really, really good, nice, sweet family moments with everybody.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to turn it over to, I think we have a microphone, don't we? We do have a microphone. All right.
Oh, great,
so
thank you.
We got 2 microphones. The
oh,
budget
my God,
is up.
this is amazing.
Right? So we could only get a quarter sheet cake, but we got 2 microphones.
She had the first hand up right there. I like your sweatshirt. Hi. Yes. What kept it going for so long? Well, I mean, by the time I got in there, it was already moving along at a steady pace. Season 13. I do believe it's a combination of like the 3 main creative voices that brought the show into being, in addition to the animation, which is beautiful, which is Matt Groening and his drawing style, which is so unique and different, and really one of a kind, kind of unique style. And he had kind of a jaundiced view of stuff, like satirical view of life. Melded with Jim Brooks, or James L. Brooks, who's our executive producer, who had come from, writing television shows such as Mary Tyler Moore and Taxi, and directing films like Broadcast News in terms of endearment. It had come from a very strong sense of story and of character and of emotionality. And then the third main person was Sam Simon, who was the first showrunner, who was this amazing comedy writer who first of all chose the staff and found people like John Swartzwelder and George Meyer and Al Jean and Mike Reese, who were on the early staff, who were really smart and different kind of thinking comedy writers. And the 3 of them kind of made this kind of amalgamy of heart and emotion and weirdness and comedy that made it all work. And I think if one of those 3 hadn't been around, it might not have been the same. So I think that just laid this groundwork for the show, that it also enabled us and create this world of characters in this weird town, Springfield, that just enabled any kind of story to be told. And any given week, anything can happen. And the amazing template that, for the most part, when the episode ends, it more or less goes back to where it was a week ago. So you could watch any episode in any order, more or less, and like it all just resets again. So it's just like a perfect machine. And thankfully, enough people keep watching it that they want to keep making new ones. And the actors are incredible, of course. Hi. Well, I would say that we mostly just sort of do it to make ourselves, to be amusing to ourselves. Like we see ourselves as the target audience. Like we're never really thinking like, although I did mention we're going to hire somebody who's a giant TikTok star for one episode. That was sort of like, oh, that'll be fun. But like I think we're mostly thinking of like what makes us laugh and what makes us. We're not really necessarily thinking like, oh, a kid will like this, or I mean, we know that like kids love it, so kids tend to love like the more visual humor and slapsticky kind of stuff, and the older people, college, whatever, might get the more sophisticated references. But we're mostly just doing it for kind of for ourselves, you know. You had a second question? Yeah. I think it just. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jordan. I'm sorry. Uh, yeah, mostly just like for the particular episode. You know, we might say like, oh, we've had like we need a Bart episode. Like we'll say like, you know, we have like a 3 or 4 in a row where it's like a big Homer episode or a big Marge episode or something. So like let's think of something for Bart. We'll definitely do that. Or Lisa. Lisa tends to get overlooked sometimes. So we'll say like we really could use a good Lisa episode here. So we tend to try to make sure that we're not doing all one kind of thing. And the great thing is we have a really great staff full of many people who are super talented, who have all different interests and different things that make them laugh. So that's one way to sort of bring variety to the stories as well. Oh, sure, Alex, right? Is it? Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think Simpsons started it, you know. So again, I think that a lot of that comes from that influence of Jim Brooks, who is always looking for the emotional truth of something. Even though, I mean, like one of the most famous episodes from way back when is the one where Bart Homer ended up skateboarding over the gorge and fell over 3 times and fell into and you know. But at the core of that was about him like being concerned about Bart and loving Bart and you know and wanting to be a good dad. You know, so it always comes from there. Otherwise, it's just just silliness. And F is for Family, I really give so much credit to Bill Burr, who he's one of the he's one of the funniest people I've ever known in my life, and he's one of the great stand-up comedians of all time. Always funny, but his comedy comes from a place of observation, of observing what's really going on in the world. So he would often be the one in our writers' room who would say like, "Yeah, this joke is really funny, but it's too funny here," or like, let's pull it back a little bit. So he'd always be the kind of one saying, "This is too silly," or "This reminds me too much of like a sitcom or something." So, but for the same point, that's at the same time for myself, like we wanted it to be funny, and we really work hard to make it as funny as possible. But it has to have that emotional truth, emotional resonance for it to really work. So, like, the good thing is that over the course of working on an episode or a series, a season, we'll have lots of times to edit and find things, or we'll in the editing room I'll say like, let's add a moment here. Let's take a moment. Let's make sure we see like his face. We see Bill, the kid's face. I want to see what he's feeling right now. So like I can call that out to the animators and the editor and say like, let's add a good close up of Bill and really push in on him. And so that's what's great about it. We have a lot of time to sort of craft it and to make it the way we like it. But I think you're right. Like it would be a different show if it didn't have that truth to it, emotionality to the characters. In the white hat there. Thank you. No, we've not heard anything from them, honestly. I mean, we've done some synergistic things, I guess you could say. Like I helped work on this short it was like Maggie with Star Wars and everything like that, and we did one that was dealing with the Marvel with Loki, and we might do some more of those, which are fun. But as far as like the day-to-day running of the actual show, as far as I can tell, there's no one at Disney saying you can't do that. Like they let us do what we want to do. Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I think we'll continue to make fun of Disney. Like just like when we were at Fox, every other like there were tons of jokes about how Fox was terrible, and especially about Fox News and things like that. So I would think that Disney would be cool with us still making jokes at their expense. Yeah. Oh, there's so many. You've been up for a while. Your hand's been up. Right. Right. Well, that's a great question. Probably in order to be hired as a writer in a writer's room, unless you let's say you let's say you created like a TikTok that went insane, went crazy, and they said like, all right, Hollywood's going to call you up, we want to hire you. That could possibly happen. Um, but for the most part, you still have to have kind of written material that someone can read, which is usually some kind of original. It's gone back and forth over the years. It used to be that you would want to write as a writing sample. It would be take a show that you admire, that you like, that's on television now. Um, like we just mentioned, I just talked about one of my favorite shows is What We Do in the Shadows. Like you take an episode of that and like write your own episode of that as if you're a writer on that show, or Rick and Morty or something like that, and like write what's called a spec script, a sample script of that, and it would help sort of get someone to read it, say like, oh, okay, this person knows how to structure a script, this person knows how to write jokes, this person came up with an interesting story. So you want to have a couple of those, or maybe an original or something like that. But you still, for the most part, then you need to get an agent who will represent you. So sometimes in order to get the agent, you'll need to have that kind of writing sample. They'll want to read you, so you'll have like or original screenplays or whatever like that. Then if you get an agent who will represent you, then they'll be the ones when a show is looking for writers, they'll submit you and say, this is my client, read his stuff or read her stuff, and then the showrunner, if it's me or whatever, will then read that stuff. So like when I was hiring writing staff for F is for Family, we had all kinds of there's various levels of writing positions. There's entry level and there's like higher up, and so but we had maybe like one or two positions open on the staff, and I was submitted like around 100 various people, hundred people, of various degrees of credits in the industry, and I would read I'd read as much of their stuff as I could, So you want your spec scripts to be really strong, and especially strong in like the first 5 or 10 pages, because sometimes that's the most people will read. Like they'll read the first 5 pages, and if you don't grab them, then they might say, next, because I have to read 50 scripts tonight, so you really want to make sure they're really good and really strong, and have a. But ultimately, unless you are one of those breakout people, who has an amazing viral sensation that goes crazy, you'll be judged a lot by how you write, how you appear on the page, what your writing is. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to say definitively. I think it's always good to have a couple of different things, So it might be good to have one spec of a existing show, because a showrunner might want to read that. I would prefer that, honestly, if I was hiring right now and I had to read 100 scripts. If I read 30 What We Do in the Shadows, because I know that show really well, or if I read 30 Veeps or Curb Your Enthusiasm or whatever, then I'd be like, I understand this show. I know who these characters are, and I'm not just like looking to see if this person is a good writer, is a good thing. Um, it's hard to get my head around having to read like 30 original scripts in a night, whatever. But that's just from my point of view. But also like to have something original is good. I think it's good to probably have at least one of each, one sample of an existing thing, and one original thing, and maybe something that's like completely like a short story or a play or something. something that speaks to who you are and what your interests are as well. Very good. Yeah. Oh, there's so many. I don't understand. How about all the way in the very, very, very back? Hi. Oh, what I learned from Montclair that I still use. Well, I think the main thing I learned, which was fun, was that I had a really, really close knit group of friends. I was a theater major here, so I was not involved in this part in broadcasting, or the broadcasting department was very small at that time. But I had a really good group of close friends in the theater, and we would spend all our time together. And part of that was where I mentioned earlier about being funny. We also were just always making jokes with each other, So I think I sort of helped develop my sense of humor and comedy there, and we stayed close and encouraged ourselves. And then after I was done with school here, and I went to grad school for a little bit, we were involved in a theater company together in Newark, in the Ironbound section of Newark for several years, and that really helped me develop my taste in terms of material and directing and everything as well. I'm still close with them. I'm going to see a bunch of them on Monday. Yeah. Would you say what one key to success? Boy, I think for me it was. I mean, it was really a combination of luck, of well, it was a really working hard, and luck in terms of meeting the right people and someone who saw me and encouraged me. But also, I would say this: it was also with a knowledge of that there was literally nothing else that I wanted to do, that I felt I could do, that I felt I was good at. So it enabled me to, because I went to Los Angeles from New York and went through a period of almost 2 years where almost nothing was happening for me, and it was I couldn't just decide well, I guess I'll go be a lawyer now instead or whatever. I've got a law degree, or I'll go back to med school. I had literally nothing. I had no skills, so I could proofread. I was a proofreader at one point, and I was a substitute teacher at one point. But so it enabled me to sort of just stick with it and say I'm going to either make it or not, And so that really helped. So a real passion for what I wanted to do and what I felt I could do saw me through some hard times. Sure. Yes, right there, and then. Well, we certainly have I mean, I wouldn't say writer's block, but well, I mean, The Simpsons especially we're going now into, I believe, upwards of 750 episodes, which is hard, And so we do try to find new things, new ways of telling stories. So coming up in the next season or so, we're going to have an extra Halloween show. There'll be the regular Halloween show that was just on, last week, and that'll be next year. But there's also going to be another one that's going to be just a full-on half-hour show that is a half-hour version of a Halloween episode, based on some Stephen King stuff. And then we have a show coming up towards the end of the season that's kind of a two-parter that is sort of our take on Fargo, or the kind of streaming drama show. It'll be called a non-canonical show, where it's basically about Ned Flanders finds some money and bad guys come after it, kind of thing. But it's really, really gonna be fun. And so we're always trying to find some new way of doing stuff and finding a different way of telling stories, or a different kind of thing. Or some of the guys asked me at lunch too about staying current. So we have an episode where Homer, quite through an accident, locks the dog in the car. The dog actually locks himself in the car, but he happens to be outside, and so everyone sees it, and he becomes like a viral sensation of like the monster who locked his dog in a car, and then they break the window to get the dog out, and then he tries to apologize, and the apology blows up in his face, and he becomes like a pariah, like an internet canceled kind of pariah, and so then he hooks up with a consultant played by Kamel Nanjiani, who like is like, I can help you fix your internet pariahism, and he hooks up with several other characters who have become like Helen Lovejoy, who's the Reverend Lovejoy's. She's like a Karen, you know, who like she was like yelling at kids running a lemonade stand or something. I forget what else happened. And like Bill House's father Kirk did something. He became the guy yelling like, did you all see that thing a year or so ago? The guy in the bagel store yelling, the short guy in the bagel store, right? So there's that, you know, so that kind of thing. So it is finding like the stuff that's out there now and finding a way to have fun with it in the Simpsons world. So yeah, so we'll keep trying to do that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, yeah, right there, yeah. Oh, yeah, right there, yeah. Yes. Yeah, I mean, really, it is just getting seen. I think getting your stuff seen. You know, I mean, in one way, we're in an amazing time where I think every year they come out with like a list, but like I think upwards of like 500 scripted shows are on various forms of TV right now, which is amazing. Because when I was younger, there were like 3 networks, and then Fox was the 4th network. So that's incredible. So there's in one way there's a lot of opportunity, but it's still like there's a lot of competition, and it's about finding the way to get seen, to get your stuff seen, and to have, first of all, to have really good stuff, to have good material, to have something that will really speak for you, and then to have someone to look at it and read it. You know, but you've really, I would say the one thing is make sure you really have good stuff, like really work on your stuff, and make sure, like, send it to your friends, whatever. Make sure it's really, really strong before you get that, so you're ready for that opportunity when someone says, hey, what have you got? You know, here you go, I've got my 3 scripts right now. You know, you don't want to either say, I don't have anything, or you don't want to say, oh, I got a thing I'm half worked on, and give it to them, because then that might be your one shot. So be really, really work hard, and be ready for when the opportunity comes. And also, a lot of it involves networking, and what's so great is now that we're sort of coming out of hopefully, fingers crossed, really coming out of COVID, that you can be again here on a campus, or be out in the world, and go to a show or something like that, and meet people, and find people who have similar interests, who will become like your network of friends that will help you maybe find the PA job on a TV show, that will help you then meet a writer who will then read your stuff, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, right there, all the way in the back. Oh well, so I think you're asking like, we only had so many episodes left to do of the show, and how did we decide which ones to do? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Right. Well, we could have done so many. I felt like we had so many. I mean, it's so funny because like they go, like, how long could a show like that last? Well, I mean, but it's a show about a family, you know. So like the family would continue to live on, you know, something would happen to them. Um, but knowing we only had 8 episodes, which was hard because most of our seasons had been 10 episodes, was difficult. And I actually did a little trick that you'll see when you watch the episodes, is that um, there's 2 episodes, one towards the beginning of the season and one towards the end of the season, that have these 2 or 3 minute montages in it set to music where a lot of stuff happens. Those would have been the 2 extra episodes. So
you went Rocky on them.
yeah, right. So there's an episode early on where big changes happen with Frank and his job, and he has to sort of figure out and process it, and the guy says, just go on this journey with me, see if you can make it work, you know. And it could have been a whole episode, but it literally takes up like 2 minutes of musical montage, and it's like, hey, I got through it, you know. So like that happens, and then in the next to last episode, there's a big montage that covers a lot of other stuff that would have been like those are the 2 missing episodes, or those music montages. But then once we knew what we had to do, then we kind of had to work towards that make 8 the final episode. So there's a lot of stuff we wanted to do that we just didn't have time for, space for. That makes me sad, but maybe someday we'll find some other way to do it. Oh, one more. Okay, right there.
It's up to you.
I'm good for whatever.
All
Keep
right.
going. Yeah.
Keep it coming.
Oh, great. Well, as far as the animation side of things is concerned, I'm not an expert. I do know that like there's a lot of animation going on right now. I mean, the one thing that Keith was saying, which is true, is that when COVID hit, all the live action went out of production for many, many months, you know, but animation was able to continue going on. So there became this giant boom in animation. Everybody was like, animation, animation, animation. So this is a good time to get into the animation industry. You probably would start like as a storyboard artist or something, you know. I don't honestly know like what the channels are of that. I know a lot of like we hired a lot of people who just came from someone who our animation director knew, but I do believe it. I mean, that's really where I think you've got to have like a good portfolio and of stuff, you know. But I believe there's some animation houses in New York. There's a lot, and there's a lot in LA. There's a lot all over the country now and all over the world. Like we use a lot of people in Canada, but I do believe there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of animation going on if you're good. But I do believe probably that you would start out in there like a board artist or cleaning up or something like that. But I wish I knew more personally how to help you in that way. But I think that's what's going on right now. Sure. The young lady all the way in the back there. Yes. Right. What I know of it is that Balenciaga came to The Simpsons and had this idea, and then they went to our bosses, you know, at Gracie Films, and said we'd like to do this thing where like a partnership where they paid for it. I believe Balenciaga paid for it to have this 10-minute short produced. That would then be that amounted to what Balenciaga's runway show at Fashion Week was, just that, right? I mean, I think if you were in there in Paris watching it, all they did was they just showed that, and that was it. Like they didn't have actual people come out or anything. It was just the Simpsons wearing all the Balenciaga clothes. So that was a very unique partnership. I just worked on it a little tiny bit. We were all working on it together, but I like one day in the room I was there, like we were just throwing out ideas. But that's what happened with that. So I don't know. We were all again. Someone mentioned like, how do you know when a thing goes? We had no idea like it would be. I mean, we knew it would be something people would be interested in, but like we didn't know it would be such a big deal. So that was fun. Yeah, we said like, should they should all send us like those clothes now, right? Just, but no, no. Yes, right there. Oh, that's a very
Million dollar question.
that is such a simple question. I don't know. I honestly don't know, and I hope we don't have to figure that out anytime in my lifetime. I don't know. I really don't know how you would end it. I know Al Jean has mentioned, so maybe the fact that he said it means that we won't do it. Um, but would be to sort of loop it around again and like have the final episode end where the first episode started, you know, where it's Christmas and they're going to Bart's Christmas pageant or something like that. But we have an episode coming up. I'm trying to remember. No, I'm sorry. I thought we had an episode come up that kind of touched on that story again in a different way. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I really don't know. If it ever comes, I hope. Well, one thing I hope is that when it does come, they let us know. Like, okay, this is going to be the last episode now, so we have a chance to write the last episode, like we had with Officer Family. I'd hate for it just to be like they canceled us and we're finished already. So I really don't know. Well, I mean, The Simpsons has been on for 35 years, and now that it's owned by Disney, I mean, they're still making Mickey Mouses, you know, after long after the original Mickey people are gone, you know. So
A lot invested in the
I
theme
could
park.
see
there,
that Disney would want to keep making some kind of version of The Simpsons. Who knows? I mean, they spent like a lot of money for it, and it's been very, very popular on Disney Plus, which has been great, and we're still doing well on Fox. So, I mean, I was half joking, but I don't know. I mean, what'll happen in the we're definitely have enough. We're picked up through another season 34, I think, which would like take us through like a year and a half from now. But as long as they want to keep making them, and as long as the main actors want to keep doing them, I think they'll figure out a way to keep it going. Or if they ended the show on Fox, and I believe there'd be some way that the Simpsons would still live on, and in some way that Disney would want to continue it in some way. I'm not privy to that, what that would mean, but I think, like I said, like they're still making Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse stuff right now, you know, all those years later. So I don't know. Sure. Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, uh, you'd have to sort of write out like have it figured out in your head what it is, you know, and then probably write what's called a pitch or a treatment for it, you know, where you're really able to delineate what it's about and what it means and what the characters are. And you know, nowadays, it's like an old man. Nowadays, uh, if you pitch something to like a Netflix, they tend to want to know like not just what is the idea, but like what is the first season about? What is the second season? They really want to know like what are the stories and everything like that. So you want to have a good idea of like where it's going and what it is, and really delineate it. Maybe have some, if you have artwork, you know, something like that. That's probably the main thing to do, and maybe have a script or something. A script can help or not, but like really have a way to sort of really um, detail what it's about in a fun way that makes people want to watch it or want to hear more. Yeah. One more? Okay. Okay, two more. Okay, great.
And then stick around. By the way, we got a picture. We're going to be
Oh, great.
a group photo.
Fantastic. Hmm. Right. Yeah, it's roughly true. Yeah. Uh-oh. And get out of here. Uh, no, I mean, well, I will say this, that The Simpsons, it helps that The Simpsons has been around for so long. Someone I know, someone I follow on Twitter wrote it in a way that makes sense to me. I can't quite quote it exactly, but it was like, it's not so much that The Simpsons predicted stuff, but that the real world became so ridiculous and a parody of itself that it rose to the level of absurdity of The Simpsons. You know, like to say, I mean, there was an episode that was 20 years ago predicting the future where it said like, oh, we inherited quite a mess from President Trump. You know, and it was, I mean, at the time it was absurd. Oh, it's ridiculous. You know, and then, but it came true. But even at the time, back in those days, Donald Trump was considering running for president, so it wasn't that out of the blue. You know, so some things happen that just come true. Like we're certainly not privy to anything. We have no magical powers or anything like that. Well, it's amazing too. I'll say this, like through manipulation of Photoshop and stuff, I've seen some things. Even I saw one the other day. I asked my boss, I was like, "Did we really do this?" But it was like a thing. It was a picture of Lisa next to a painting. It was like an artifact, and it said the squid from Squid Game. And I was like, did that really on it? He's like, no, of course not. It was like, okay, well, I didn't know, but it looked good enough. You know, like there's a way to manipulate these things, and specifically with the Trump thing, because we did a thing right after Trump announced he was running for president, where he did that thing where he went down the escalator, and we made like a little short that was just for YouTube, where Homer was like standing behind him running down the escalator. And people took that as evidence of a thing that we had written like 20 years ago. But we wrote it after the real thing happened, you know, so there's a lot of misinformation out there, I'd say. But we have no idea how things are going to turn out. We don't know how to predict things. Yes, last question. Yeah. Well, I guess it would just be to sort of stay in touch, like socially or something like that. You know, physical networking would it maybe be involved with if you're able to get even an entry level job at like an animation house or something. You know, even if you're the person that gets the whatever, you know, the PA kind of position. You know, where you get to meet people who are doing what you do. Anything like that, I think, is good. Will help you. Because eventually you want to have someone who will look at your stuff and say, "Oh, wow, this is great," you know. But you can't do it on day one. You know, you can't walk in right in the door. So any kind of position where you're around people like that, or you get to see that, just take it. You know, as far as like staying connected, just, you know, if you follow me, I'm on Twitter. I have the lamest Twitter handle of all time, which is just Mike Price in LA. But I think they put it on the thing that the school has tweeted out. Yeah, so follow me on Twitter if you ever want to hit me up on there, whatever. Or if I'll follow you back, and if I see something cool, I'll retweet it, and you know, things like that. Yeah.
All right. So with that, I'd like to big round of applause.
Thank you.
And not for nothing. I mean, you have been more than generous over time, you know, in many ways, more ways than we can recount, but maybe most importantly, the generosity with our students. And you've been just a real champion for the kids from Montclair State, both here and in LA. And so I just want to sincerely thank you for everything.
Oh, well, thank you, Keith. It's such a pleasure to come here every time, and it's so nice to meet you guys.
So Keith, what are we doing? Tell us how we're going to run this. Oh, Mike, we got the pros, bro. All right.